Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So, we had been doing our tafsir class for quite a while, and subhanAllah, I found myself from tafsir and then right now doing the pearls, but I could see that those topics, and without me planning, to be honest, it just goes and it just went into the same area. And I guess taking us into recognizing the dangers of different people that could be the main influence, that might be the fitna that surrounds us. So I found myself, when we were doing the tafsir class, we were talking about the dangers of the people that surround you and al-awliya, and it was talking about uh, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, speaking about the importance of, I guess, seclusion, the importance, and we were talking about how the Qissisin and Ruhban and how their seclusion probably gave them some, let's call it the removal of arrogance. That time of seclusion just taught them how to realize that what was important wasn't necessarily the interest that you might get, but it was the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what is most important, the most important thing. And that's what's, of course, the main reason why even the Prophet ﷺ and all prophets throughout history, just keep this one in mind, all prophets had a time for seclusion, a time for just personal, a personal timing that they would just sit just for not necessarily doing anything, but just a time for just emptying everything that's in the brain, everything that's in the heart, and just taking a moment and a time of self, time off. And it's not necessarily holding your phone and looking and scrolling the reels, but no, it was a time where you're really literally doing nothing, just making tafakkur, inner tafakkur. And that's what we would see the Prophet ﷺ was doing when he was going for Ghar Hira. That's what we would see other prophets were also doing. It was just a time of just you and this empty space where it's just you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. And this time of that tafakkur was extremely important in order to help our brains detox and remove all the contaminations from the world that surrounds us, whether it's the busy world or whether it's the different influences or whether it's our own arrogance. And this is extremely important. We can not realize many times, and specifically our arrogance. Why did we want to focus on that? Because remember that ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, when it talked about ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ مِنْهُمْ قِسِّسِينَ وَرُهْبَانًا, and it was emphasizing that they were not arrogant. وَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. And this is extremely important to remove that arrogance. You can be a qassis and have the knowledge, but with arrogance. And you'll find yourself that all the knowledge that you had, if you have arrogance, it can actually lead you to hellfire and not lead you to light. And this is extremely important to keep in mind. Remember that man that we talked about, Abdullah al-Qasimi, how that man really had ilm, that man worked and studied and wrote a number of different books to defend Islam. And eventually, due to his arrogance, due to his kibr, he thought that he was the center of knowledge. And that's when you saw that shift and he became an atheist and died as an atheist. And this is extremely important for us to just take some of those examples on what we need to learn in order to stick to the pearls of the Prophet ﷺ, in order to stick to the guidance of al-Wahy. So we talked about one, we talked about the orbit, the people that surround you, and two, we also talked about the arrogance and the importance in removing the arrogance and working on that. And of course, to remove the arrogance is actually to stick to one particular thing, and that is to glorify the Lord himself alone. That's why, remember when we also did Surah Al-Muddathir, Ya ayyuha al-Muddathir, qum fa'andir, wa rabbaka fakabbir. That was key. It's important to recognize that you're on a mission. Qum fa'andir, wa rabbaka fakabbir. But there's no way that you can give da'wah if you yourself are not recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is your main center. قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. But you also got to do one key thing, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. It's also cleansing the outside, cleansing your clothes, cleansing ثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. It's not an issue of just removing the contamination off your clothes. وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. And that's a metaphor. It's not an issue of cleansing just the outside and making yourself appear somebody that is appealing to people. But it's important that you would make وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ, that you would make your inner soul pure of all the different contaminations. And on top of that is al-kibr. So we looked into some of the different things the Prophet ﷺ was teaching the Sahaba. And in particular here, he was teaching Shaddad ibn Aus. Just an idea, Shaddad ibn Aus, I forgot to mention about Shaddad ibn Aus. Shaddad ibn Aus was a Sahabi from Al-Ansar. Shaddad ibn Aus, later, I even visited his grave. It's right at the doors of al-Masjid al-Aqsa, right at the doors in Bab al-Asbat. It's called Bab al-Asbat, right there. And it says right there.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just wondered if you could make it louder a little bit.
Oh, you know what, Noura? Yes, I can. Hold on. Let me.
Sorry, it just sounded a little bit far away.
Noura, good job, Noura. When the sound is low, okay, here we go. When the sound is low, definitely remind me. Good job, Noura. Good job. Okay. So is this better?
Yeah, a little bit better.
A little bit better. Let me see if I can make it a little more better. Okay, even though that's not good English, but yeah. Is this better? No?
Keep talking.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, that's good.
That's better? Okay. All right. So let's continue this hadith. Now, Shaddad ibn Aus was a Sahabi that later actually held a very important position. He was a qadi within, of course, Bayt al-Maqdis and Bilad al-Sham. So Shaddad ibn Aus, the Prophet ﷺ was teaching him, إذا رأيت الناس قد اكتنزوا الذهب والفضة فاكنز هؤلاء الكلمات. If you see people taking and trying to gather gold and silver and trying to hoard those treasures, then you hoard a few words. In other words, they're more important than anything that you can collect, that you can hoard, that you can somehow try to spend the time and the effort to collect and say, Allahumma inni as'aluka thabata fil amr. Ya Allah, I ask you to keep me steadfast on my path and on this matter. What matter? The matter of La ilaha illallah. Why? Because you can have deen right now. You can be perhaps a person that's committed to your deen right now, but you don't know if that's going to be forever. So what you would do is make the dua, Allahumma inni as'aluka thabata fil amr wal azimata ala rushd, and give me al-azima, the determination, ala rushd, on guidance, because you can know the guidance, but then you may lose your energy to work through it. You may lose your energy to stay on the right path. So making the dua that you would have the determination, that you would have the consistency, and that you would have the energy to move on with guidance, to move on and even go up the ranks of guidance. وَأَسْأَلُكَ مُوجِبَاتِ رَحْمَتِكَ. And I ask you to give me whatever that would guarantee me to be included within your mercy. وَعَزَائِمَ مَغْفِرَتِكَ. And to give me the guidance to the things that would lead me to finding the best of what would guarantee that I would be included within your forgiveness. وَأَسْأَلُكَ شُكْرَ نِعْمَتِكَ. And I ask you to grant me the ability to be thankful for all the different things that you had blessed me with. وَحُسْنَ عِبَادَتِكَ. And to be amongst those that would worship in the best way, that is, with sincerity. وَأَسْأَلُكَ قَلْبًا سَلِيمًا. And I ask you to give me a pure heart. Why? Because when you're looking at that pure heart, that's actually key to being a pure person. We would say the focus during our times on, I guess, the Botox and the appearance and filling this up and emptying this down and all the different things that they're trying to let you focus, that it's all about your appearance. It's going to guarantee a job. It's going to guarantee social acceptance. It's going to guarantee you that guys will run after you. And it's all really nothing but fake appearance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that focus. وَأَسْأَلُكَ قَلْبًا سَلِيمًا. I ask you to give me a heart that is salima. What is salim? Salim is healthy. Salim could also mean in Lugha Arabiya a person that was bit by a snake. How is it bit by a snake? You're asking them to be salim. It wasn't something that they considered, that sometimes you want to be hopeful, even though if a person was bit by a snake, well, there are high chances that this probably is a venomous snake. But certainly they didn't have the ways to cure such such poisons and such venom. So they would just call them salim in hope that this person would be healthy and would be cured. Now, when you're looking at salim, they definitely, with that snake bite, they definitely were hopeful to perhaps maybe, if we are hopeful enough, that this would make this person get cured, even though we know for a fact that this person was bit by a snake. But salim itself is actually to mean a person cured, and a person that is empty of hate, empty of arrogance, empty of show off, empty of all the different things that might let the person focus on people rather than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And qalban salima, the most important thing is that you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qalban salima, the most important thing is that your heart is sincere and doing everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we get that qalb salim? We would get the qalb salim by what usually helps get your qalb in place is lisanan sadiqa, is an honest tongue, is a tongue that is always truthful. When you speak, that's what is going to be later affecting your heart without you realizing. What you say starts vibrating into your heart. As you speak, it will be what is on your mind, and whatever you say, it will later start vibrating into identifying your identity by vibrating into your heart. If you speak with arrogance, your heart is going to be filled with arrogance. If you speak with taqwa, it will later radiate and fill your heart with taqwa. When I look at the word lisanan sadiqa, you could see that there's a special emphasis in the Quran with the word dhikr in lisan, and what the tongue is talking about and what the tongue is saying and doing that dhikr. If you're struggling with faith, you're struggling with your arrogance, you're struggling with yourself, you're struggling with your sincerity, you're struggling with the complaining, you're struggling with all of that. Lisanan sadiqa, speak in honesty, speak in dhikr, and that will be key to giving you all the different purity that you need, perhaps to fix a lot of the different contaminations that are affecting your heart and affecting our heart as well. Just keep that one in mind, because at many times we may not recognize how to fix and how to work on fixing some of our issues, or let me call it sometimes fixing some of our illnesses. Now, many times we may need to probably see a professional, a doctor, etc., in order to get a treatment for a certain illness. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ are teaching us that a lot of the illnesses can actually be removed by having a lisanan sadiqa. Lisan, your tongue. This is a metaphor. This is not talking about the actual tongue, the actual, I guess, piece in your mouth, but this is actually talking about a metaphor. It's what your words are saying. وَلِسَانًا صَادِقًا وَأَسْأَلُكَ مِنْ خَيْرِ مَا تَعْلَمُ. And I ask you to give me the best of what you would know. Best of what he would know. What does that mean? Well, remember, the Lord Almighty is beyond time. And because he is beyond time, you would want him to decree the best of the things that he had already known are going to happen to you. And وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا تَعْلَمُ. And I seek refuge in you. I seek refuge in you in what you would know was an evil decree that was going to happen to me. Maybe the loss of my son, a daughter, an illness, loss of a job, financial hardship, whatever it is. وَأَسْتَغْفِرُكَ لِمَا تَعْلَمُ. And I seek forgiveness in what you would know about my sins. And this is extremely important to keep in mind, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows those moments that you would be in seclusion, knows those moments when no one knows anything about you but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Making these du'as are extremely important, because that repetition changes your vision. I did a whole lecture, it's called Mindfulness in Islam, and it talks about how changing what you say and changing what you see and how you perceive the world around you, that in order to change it, sometimes you need to put and invest in repeating certain words that are giving you hope, that are giving you, I guess, a reflection into recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power above you. That's number one. Number two, it's not only repetition that you would want to do, but it's also changing the society and changing the people that surround you. And we talked about this area. What society can I change and what do I need to change? The most important thing that you would recognize is that as a human being, we're always wanting a good example to mimic, an area to somehow see through them, an example that we can replicate. And certainly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given us the stories about the prophets in order to tell us the stories of the prophets, and that we're supposed to be mimicking them, because that's how the story of Islam started out. How do you continue, how you would invest in making the story of such a legacy continue throughout all the different ages? In other words, for a Muslim, they would recognize that the story of Islam doesn't end with the death of the Prophet ﷺ, or the death of a leader, or the death of a Khalifa, or the death of our mother or father, or whatever. The story doesn't end there, because the story of Islam goes past any leader. Even when the Prophet ﷺ died, and you had many leaving Islam, it was a wave. What we would today use and describe it as a trend. It was becoming viral. The same language. It was becoming viral. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq stands up and he says, whoever used to worship Muhammad had died. But whoever worshipped and whoever worships Allah, Allah shall never die. And that's the same thing when we're speaking about the legacy that the prophets had left behind. The prophets had died and they can die, but the legacy continues. And that's what Islam was, and the Quran was always trying to tell us, that this prophet took over the legacy after the death of the other prophet. And after the death of the other prophet, someone else took the legacy, and that's probably a salih person and another salih person. We don't end with the death of a particular figure, but we would continue the legacy, because al-Irbad ibn Sariya, a Sahabi, the Prophet ﷺ teaches him and teaches them, عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء المهديين الراشدين تمسكوا بها وعضوا عليها بالنواجذ وإياكم ومحدثات الأمور فإن كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة. I want you to look at this one. Who's al-Irbad ibn Sariya? Al-Irbad ibn Sariya was a Sahabi, but this Sahabi was considered from Ahl al-Sufa. What is Ahl al-Sufa? Or what are Ahl al-Sufa? So Ahl al-Sufa were pretty much the homeless Sahaba. The majority of them were from, let's say, the impoverished, the very poor Sahaba that had migrated from Mecca, sorry, and they didn't have a place to stay. Their place to stay was in the masjid. They didn't have a room. They didn't have anywhere in any place where anybody is probably maybe giving them a place to stay, and the only place that they could stay in was really the masjid. So one day, al-Irbad ibn Sariya, he mentions a story. He comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, we're hungry. So Bilal ibn Rabah had already collected, and well, at least Bilal ibn Rabah, it's not that he had collected, but I guess he was making a distribution, kind of like a food shelf. But the food shelf, it didn't have canned foods. Their food shelf only contained dates. So he had these sacks of dates and huge amounts of dates, but their food shelf was basically all done. So then Bilal ibn Rabah is trying to see if there's anything left in the sack. there were only 7 dates. So the Prophet ﷺ says, he takes these, and then he basically tells him, gather all your friends. Gather all the friends? Yes, gather all the friends. And then they would gather. And then the Prophet ﷺ basically puts his barakah on it. He makes a dua, reads something, and then they would eat and eat. Al-Irbad ibn Sariyah is watching, and he says, we continued to eat, but they were as if they were the same exact number. Each and every single one of us kept a seed where we ate each definitely more than 7. And then finally, the Prophet ﷺ, after they had all eaten, the Prophet ﷺ then gives it to a young child, and he takes it. But when you look at that, although the story, just to mention, is not necessarily on the very authentic side, but it has a lot of narrations that spoke of it. The stronger story of something similar was actually a story of Abu Huraira. Abu Huraira came to Abu Huraira was sitting with the Prophet ﷺ and a number and a bunch of Sahaba. And Abu Huraira, the Prophet ﷺ, of course, was asking Abu Huraira to basically start distributing the milk. Everybody was thirsty. Everybody was hungry. Well, they only had one container. They didn't have plastic cups. No, it was just one container, and everyone was going to drink from that same container. It was a utensil. Here we go. So in order for everybody to drink, well, they have to go in turns. So when Abu Huraira brings that milk, Abu Huraira, he was hoping to be told to drink first because he was extremely thirsty and extremely hungry. So the Prophet ﷺ then takes it and starts and tells Abu Huraira to pass it on. Everyone drink. Abu Huraira was worried that by now I don't have a share. By now, everyone drank. For sure, there's nothing left. So the Prophet ﷺ tells Abu Huraira to drink. Abu Huraira drinks. And then the Prophet ﷺ tells him to drink. And then he drinks. And Abu Huraira was worried, remember before, that he wasn't going to have an enough amount of milk left for him. But the Prophet ﷺ tells him to continue drinking. And then Abu Huraira said, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَكَ بِالْحَقِّ لَا أَجِدُ لَهُ مَسْلَكَ. By the one that sent you with truth, I can't find any space for that milk in my belly anymore. Why? Because right there, Abu Huraira was worried that he wasn't going to get a share. But then he realized that with the barakah, with the blessings that is coming from the Prophet ﷺ, that there is going to be that blessing, not only in the words, but even in the milk that Prophet ﷺ had drunk from, or even in the teachings that the Prophet ﷺ was teaching. Now, who were those that were taking this barakah? Those were those that had surrounded the Prophet ﷺ, and in particular, al-Khulafa. In particular, those that had led after the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because the ilm that the Prophet ﷺ had left behind, every single Sahabi that had witnessed a particular, in a part of that information, passed it on. And then it became that knowledge that later down the road was recorded, written, probably the 2nd century Hijrah, and so forth. But it's important to look at what the Prophet ﷺ was teaching al-Irbad ibn Sariya and the rest of the Sahaba. عليكم بسنتي. You want to stay guided. You want an area to take as a good example. You want to find a celebrity. Well, make sure that you would hold on to the legacy. When you look at bisunnati, that means the legacy. That means the teachings. That means the words. That means the inspiration. All of that. Alaykum bisunnati. You know, right now, people are debating, is there really a conspiracy going on? Whether the leaders, political leaders, or whether the celebrities, or whether the rich people, is there a conspiracy happening? Does it at all exist? Well, two things to say. There's definitely a conspiracy, and there's absolutely no conspiracy. It's not an oxymoron. No. There's definitely a conspiracy. In other words, a plan and an agenda that they are actually supporting one another on. And that's the agenda of a shaitan. There's no doubt about that. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us beforehand, that shaitan and his awliya la yuhuna ila ba'dihim. Inna shayateen la yuhuna ila awliyaihim. Shayateen would inspire their awliya, would inspire those that follow them, would inspire those that are entertained by their path. And at the same time, you would see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us throughout history that yes, there's going to be an agenda. This agenda is what many will call conspiracy. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that, well, this isn't something that is hidden. It is actually known, because the Lord Almighty had foretold you that they've got an agenda. So it's not a conspiracy anymore, because we know that there's an agenda. Whether it's the elite within, of course, the liberals, the new atheists, the postmodernists, the feminists, the right now we're even seeing even those that might appear in names in Abdullah, Muhammad, they would have Muslim names. And believe it or not, some of those are even more dangerous than the names that would come forward as David and, I don't know, Christian and whatever their names are, because we may not recognize that they're coming in with a completely different idea, that it's becoming this honey that is filled with venom without us realizing. And that's extremely important to keep in mind, because not because he may appear as a Muslim, it doesn't make him as a Muslim that is inspired by Islam. So how do I know? Well, that's why the Prophet ﷺ was saying, well, giving you at least a key thing to stay protected from shaitan agendas. And that's why I said, is it a conspiracy or is it not? I said, it's conspiracy if you mean by conspiracy an agenda, and I tell you, yes, definitely there's an agenda. But if you mean by conspiracy to mean that it's hidden, I'll tell you it's not hidden. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you that this is what they will attempt to do. This is their plan. This is what they'll use. And whether it became, let's call it, during our times, perhaps at a higher, and I guess the magic is probably right now AI designed, and sometimes hard to see, to know, how can I know if this is actually fake or real, etc., all those different things. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving us on, and the Prophet ﷺ was giving us the inspiration in who to take as, I guess, the place of hidayah, the place of guidance, the place that we would find in order to recognize the truth from falsehood, to recognize the legacy from the manipulation. Let's see. He said, عليكم بسنتي. In order to stay protected, you need to follow my sunnah. Well, this isn't talking about the specific sunnah to mean the only what was reported on the Prophet ﷺ, or the definition of a hadith Sahih, the definition of hadith, what was ما اتصل إسناده ما صدر على الصلاة والسلام من قول أو فعل أو تقرير أو صفة, what was reported on the Prophet ﷺ, whether it's the words that he had quoted or that he had said and later were quoted about the Prophet ﷺ, or whether it's certain things that he had done, or whether it's a report or a description about the Prophet ﷺ. This isn't necessarily talking about that particular sunnah. This is talking about anything that the Prophet ﷺ had left behind, taught the Sahaba in order to learn about Islam. In other words, anything that the Prophet ﷺ had inspired the Sahaba with, whether that was probably explaining the Quran, or whether that was the whole concepts, all the concepts that are in the Quran, that's considered alaykum bi sunnati. You want to stay guided, well, follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But that's not enough. وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ الرَّاشِدِينَ. In the guidance of those khulafa. What is al-Khalifa? Al-Khalifa is supposed to be a person that comes after another person. That's al-Khalifa. So if we were to have a leader that comes after another leader, and then, kind of like an era, that would actually be a Khalifa. Now, this isn't necessarily talking about al-Khalifa to, of course, just specifically speak about al-Khulafa, meaning we're talking about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Uthman ibn Affan, and Ali ibn Abi Talib. But those were the most important ones. That's why some scholars included Umar ibn Abdul Aziz as part of al-Khulafa. Why? Because he was carrying the same legacy. He was on the same legacy. So wait a minute. What actually happened to the other Khulafa? And can we actually take them as Khulafa, or what is the whole idea when we're speaking about the legacy? That's what matters. Why? Because remember Hadith Thawban. What is the Hadith Thawban? What is Hadith Thawban? Hadith Thawban, when the Prophet ﷺ said, تَكُونُ فِيكُمُ النُّبُوَّةُ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَهَا أَن تَكُونَ. I know we're jumping a little bit, but I want you to just recognize a couple things here. We're going to take you to that hadith for a second, because everything is really connected with the other. It's trying to, I guess, get this connection. How do we understand those areas and help us see where and what we're at and what we're talking about, just to make sure we're getting the right picture. The main picture in this whole hadith is really that you want to make sure that you would connect to the legacy of the prophets, and whatever legacy and whatever that continues later on with the same legacy. And I want to right there quote this hadith when the Prophet ﷺ said, تَكُونُ فِيكُمْ نُبُوَّةُ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَهَا أَن تَكُونَ. I want to open up this hadith for you to actually see it and hopefully, we can help you and we can all, I guess, see that quote in order for you. Let's see if I can actually, I'm trying to, let's see if we can quote this hadith right there. I hope it's allowing me. Oh, not here. So while it's opening, I'll say the hadith out of my memory. The Prophet ﷺ was teaching Thawban. He said, تكون فيكم النبوة ما شاء الله لها أن تكون. Here's at least one side. ثم يرفعها الله إذا شاء أن يرفعها. النبوة is going to stay amongst you for a certain part of time. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise it. In other words, it's not going to be in control anymore. ثم تكون خلافة فتكون فيكم ما شاء الله لها أن تكون. Then it would be a khilafah, and it would be for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to be controlling for. And then فتكون فيكم ما شاء الله لها أن تكون ثم يرفع الله إذا شاء أن يرفعها ثم تكون ملكا عاضا. In another narration, ملكا عضوضا. Then it would be a monarchy that would basically be عاض. It would want to hold on to that position tightly. And then it would stay for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to stay for. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to rise and now bring an end to it, it would then be risen. And then it's another era of mulkan jabriya, a monarchy that you're forced into it, a type of leadership, a type of an enforced type of power that is on you, and it would stay for as long as the Lord Almighty would will it to stay for. ثم يرفعه الله إذا شاء أن يرفعها ثم تكون خلاف على منهج النبوة. That's what I wanted to get to. And then it becomes a khilafah on the legacy of the prophets. I want you to look at this word, على منهج النبوة. A number of different things right here to look at. Number one, when you're looking at right there, تكون فيكم النبوة ما شاء الله لها أن تكون. Let's look at that for a bit. The Prophet ﷺ, of course, stayed as a prophet, died at 11-year hijrah. And then, ثم يرفع الله إذا شاء أن يرفعها. And then, of course, you had الملك العضوض. Well, al-Khilafah lasted until 41 or 40-year hijriyah. And then الملك العضوض, it started with, certainly, we're speaking about الملك العضوض. We started 41-year hijriyah with the Umayyad Khilafah. Umayyad Khilafah lasted until 132-year hijriyah. And then we're looking at from 132 till 656, that's the Khilafah al-Abbasiyah. And then from 656 to 923, that was basically, although it was, I guess, considered Khilafah Abbasiyah, but it was actually called Umayyah, and we had Mamalik, sorry. It was actually the reality of it was actually another type of governance, but it was still considered as, I guess, tracing back to al-Khilafah al-Abbasiyah. And later it was Dawla al-Uthmaniyah that continued until March 1924. But then you look at right there, Mulkan Jabriya. It was a forced monarchy. It's going to be a forced type of a leadership. And this is the era that we're actually living in, where we were forced into these leaders, certainly by the colonizing powers. If you would look and search, well, how did Malik Hussein actually be in that position? We would know that, well, he was basically assigned by UK, by Great Britain. How did that Bashar Hafid al-Assad and the Assad family, or even the way that Lebanon, or perhaps Iraq, or perhaps Saudi Arabia, or even you're talking about North African countries, or even different Muslim countries. How did these people become the leaders over us? It was basically an assignment by the colonizing powers, mulkan jabriya. Then, well, how long is that going to stay for? If this one stayed for 11 years and this one stayed for, we're looking at we're looking at almost 1,200, well, 1,300 years, approximately. Well, how long is this colonizing power, or at least this mulk al-jabri, going to last for? Well, we don't know, but one thing we know, and one thing that is key to know, is that what really matters is that when the Khilafah ala minhaj al-nubuwah comes, that he is on the legacy. And he called it Khilafah. Is it necessarily going to be a Khalifa for real? Or is it going to be just at least the legacy, and remembering that we would go back to the legacy of the prophets? That's the most important thing that we need to keep in mind. I hope, oh dear, what happened? Okay, am I back? Can you hear me? Just making sure.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so connecting with that piece of it, and I wanted to mention that hadith because I want you to realize that it was always emphasizing that there was a legacy for the prophets, even when we looked at how the Prophet ﷺ was giving us those different eras, those different times where, yes, political changes are probably making a huge influence. And then, of course, these political changes can vary, whether it's called a monarchy that is odd, or whether it was a forced type of a monarchy, etc. But what really comes as right there, which is what we're right now anticipating that would be coming later, after the situation that is of a complete defeat that we're living in. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ had foretold us that there was going to be a khilafah ala minhaj al-nubuwah, that there was going to be that power again, that, I guess, that legacy that will come back, and what ala minhaj al-nubuwah, right on the same and exactly the same, carrying the same legacy of the prophets. But then he stayed quiet. In other words, it's never going to stay the same. In other words, even when there is a khilafah, don't think that the story ended there. Thumma sakat is letting us know that there's going to be from within a lot of fitan. Just when you thought that khilafah was going to bring about solutions to all your problems, hey, there's going to be a fitna coming with it. And there's going to be a fitna that will still come, despite the fact that you had gotten to that point where you thought that you are eliminating all the different things that were coming from this colonizing power and all of that, that just when you thought that you had defeated that. No. Even if a khilafah were to come, there's going to still be fitna that's always going to battle the truth right there. So the Prophet ﷺ was giving us those keys and telling us that what keeps you protected is not necessarily the governance, but it's actually you yourself holding on to the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ, to the legacy of the Khulafa, the legacy of those that had learned after the Prophet ﷺ, from the Prophet ﷺ, and kept the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ, whether in power or whether in knowledge or whether in practice.
And that's why he said, تَمَسَّكُوا بِهَا, hold on to it. And the word عَضُّوا عَلَيْهَا بِالنَّوَاجِذ. What does that mean? So literally it means to bite strongly onto it. But this isn't to bite strongly onto it. بالنواجذ, the nawajid are basically the back teeth. Okay, but this isn't telling you to somehow, grab a book that has the sunnah or a book of hadith and start chewing on it. This isn't at all what it was telling you to do, but it was telling you, this is a metaphor to tell you that when you hold on to something, you really got to spend a lot of time trying to absorb it. You got to spend a lot of time trying to hold on to it, even when others are trying to take it from you, that you stick to it despite all the different agendas that are probably working in order to empty the ummah from the knowledge of what the Prophet ﷺ had left behind in inspiration, in guidance, in knowledge. So in order to get that peace, you really need to work hard to learn about it, or else you're not going to be able to find the legacy. You're not going to be able to know where it is. You won't be able to hold on to it if you don't even know what it is, if you don't even know how to find it. And that's why when we're learning, for example, the pearls of the Prophet ﷺ, we're just really trying to see it and trying to learn and trying to find it, because that's what the Prophet ﷺ is telling us. You want to stay protected from all those agendas, conspiracies, all manipulations, all the shubuhat and shahawat, all the different shubuhat, basically the different misconceptions out there, and the different shahawat and all the different desires that they're trying to feed in you. You want to stay protected? There's no way to stay protected unless you hold on to the inspiration that the Prophet ﷺ had given us to know and to learn and to recognize where the parameters are, where the parameters of haqq are, the parameters of truth, the parameters of what leads you to living to the purpose, and that is Jannah. وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَمُحْدَثَاتِ الْأُمُورِ. Be careful. Giving us the warning. This وَإِيَّاكُمْ is really that warning and telling you, you gotta be careful. محدثات الأمور, that there's so many different things that are going to be appearing, that they are innovations, that they're inspiring. They'll be given different names, like it's an inspiring thing to do. It will be given different names, and it will make it something that is rather appealing, gives you positive energy, gives you a different inspiration. It's therapeutic, and the different names that are out there to manipulate you, to make it seem that it is innocent and nothing but bringing you a good outcome, is already there, as Shaitan himself had basically tried to appeal and tried to make eating from the tree that was forbidden, make it seem that it was appealing, it was an innocent thing to do, it was the right thing, and just exactly what you are needing in order to survive, give you an eternal living, and a property to give you all the different necessary means for you to continue within this existence. What happened? He basically, did he forget? He didn't forget, but he was manipulated. He was manipulated in it. He, for a second, was manipulated with that narrative. He basically had lost for a moment when he had eaten from the tree. He didn't forget per se, but he basically just went into a moment of what is called al-ghafla. What is al-ghafla? Al-ghafla is a moment when you're so busy with something, and while you are being pacified and occupied with something else, by mistake, you basically, I guess, confuse your missions, confuse yourself, and you just do something and you're like, why did I do that? I wasn't supposed to do it. How does al-ghafla happen? Well, al-ghafla happens through different ways. The most important way with ghafla is when the person is so deeply connected with entertainment. That's one. What is that? Another name for it, please, to give us an idea of what it is described by the Quran. At-taraf, luxury. Remember yesterday? What happened? Utrifu fiha. When they had lived that luxury, and that's part of muhdathat al-umur, you start the people, why would they go into making different ways of innovation and different new ways that looks appealing in order to somehow live in that area? What would actually be that place? What would actually make something look appealing? And why it-taraf? How is it-taraf connected to it? When people lose their mental and heart ability, and let's call it ruh ability, to be able to connect, to stay connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when they would start searching for anything materialistic, because they lost their ability to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within. So they start looking for anything materialistic. Let's look at Bani Israel. اجعل لنا إلها. Exactly. They have آلهة. Why can't we just make one God that resembles God? I mean, something that we need to see. What happened? That you saw all the miracles. How did the Bani Israel want to somehow have an idol that resembles God? They said, well, we want something that reminds us and inspires us about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like the Canaanites, just like the Canaanites, and just like those other nations that were surrounding them. They basically were worshiping these idols. So they thought, well, maybe we could have something similar, something that would remind us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What happened? But you saw all those miracles. When they went into taraf, when they went into luxury, when they started getting all that man and salwa and all the different things that were trying, I guess, to make their life easier, that's when they were so focused on ease that they lost that connection that there is a Lord Almighty who is giving them the rizq. They started attributing whatever good that is happening to them, that's basically their effort. They stopped seeing the actual power, whether the power to give rizq, the power to give life, the power to change everything that's around you. They stopped seeing that, and they only started seeing themselves. And that's why they started searching for something rather physical, something materialistic that resembles God. That's the same thing with the many different nations. They lost their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they then wanted to make something physical. Even with Christians, the paintings that you would see in the Vatican, those paintings, that they didn't happen until later times, when the Christians, they basically lost the inspiration that they were getting from the Bible. They wanted something physical. They wanted something that connected them to the Bible, even though before, in Christianity, art and idolatry and making sculptures and all of that was all considered as haram. It's considered going against the Bible, to the point that they didn't even have those buildings, their own roofs. They didn't even have roofs. Remember all the different Greek sculptures you would see? They all are missing their heads. A lot of the Greek sculptures, they're missing the head. The body is there, and only the ones that were probably hidden, not found, that they basically are complete. But most of the sculptures, they're basically missing the head, missing something. Because when the Byzantine Empire took over the Greek and took over basically, I guess in what was defeating all that past civilization that was based on idolatry, Christians at one point were really connected to, at least had the stronger glimpse of Tawheed. And that's why when they were finding those sculptures, they would break them because they considered that it resembled idolatry. It resembled paganism. It didn't resemble Tawheed. But you could see that with the innovations and continuing from a society that saw in sculpture making nothing but a form of idolatry and against the Bible, till later on consider that the Vatican, for example, is full of sculptures. You're looking at, of course, the different arts that you would find in churches. What was that all for? That was only happening, and that only started happening when people started losing that inspiration and connecting to the words of the Lord Almighty, even if it's containing some inspiration, not the complete inspiration. When they started losing that connection to the actual word, they started looking for something materialistic, a different, in an innovative way, in order to connect to the actual words. That's the same thing with the pagan Arab. The pagan Arab, at one point, they were actually on the path and the religion of monotheism or Tawheed, on the religion of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. But it isn't until Amr ibn al-Hayy, he goes to Syria and Lebanon and was, I guess, mesmerized, fascinated by the civilization that was there in Syria and Lebanon, and he associated that the reason why they have a magnificent civilization is because they had an idol that is a god that they had worshipped. It was Hubal. Another idol that they had worshipped is called Ashtarot. What is Ashtarot? It's basically it's an idol. I could even show you what that looks like, because we used to. Let's show you what that looks like, and that was considered the idol that was worshipped in many countries, really, as the god. Hold on, Ashtarot. I'm going to try to find it for you. Okay, here we go. I found it. And this idol was considered as the Lord of, here we go, the Lord of fertility. You could see it's basically this lady holding her breasts, and that was the religion that the Canaanites, and not only the Canaanites, but even the Phoenician, even even, in fact, it was even found in Europe and different areas. So that was the religion that they had worshipped. They considered that, hey, this is something physical that could give us the inspiration. And that's what inspired Amr ibn al-Hayy to somehow convince the people in Mecca to get an inspiration through what he thought was the main secret to the advancement and the civilization within Lebanon and Syria, which is where and what he went to. So he took that idol and took it to the people in Mecca and told them that this is the secret to prosperity. So this is what you would need to worship. And once you start worshiping that, you're going to find that the inspiration of the power of these gods is going to transform our society from a society that is rather primitive to a society that is more advanced, prosperous, and the list goes on and on. So we needed to get this connection with this inspiration and make this God. Now, I want you to look at this. It wasn't just that, but it was, of course, محدثات الأمور. محدثات الأمور, anything that is an innovation, anything that is new and not necessarily organic to the teachings of Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ says, فَإِنَّ كُلَّ مُحْدَثَةٍ بِدْعَةٍ. Every single innovated thing is basically a bid'ah. In other words, it's not organic to the actual teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. And every innovation is basically going to be a dalala. It's going to be a delusion. It may seem that it carries within it some form of inspiration, something to somehow connect you deeply with the spirit of Islam. But the truth of the matter, it's actually a delusion. And this is important to keep in mind. So how can we stay connected with the Sunnah? How can we stay connected? And even though we want something to remind us, we really, yes, we like the words, but we want something to remind us of something. Here, Ibn Abbas, let's see what he said. الشيطان جاثم على قلب ابن آدم فإذا سهى وغفل وسوس وإذا ذكر الله خنس. Wait a minute, what does that mean? الشيطان, shaitan is basically going to be, let's look at the hadith, going to be sitting on the heart of the son of Adam. Right there. فإذا سهى, if they go into a moment of, I guess, forgetting, or a moment where they're not necessarily completely focused, then he will start to inspire him with certain things. Hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Waswas. What is waswas? Is it psychosis? Well, it's like it. We can probably say perhaps some of al-waswas is probably classified as psychosis. I'm not saying that every psychosis that someone goes through is shaitan right there speaking into their ears or speaking into their head. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we know that the Quran, the ahadith, were telling us about something really important that is affecting our own deen, which is al-waswas. And we know that mental illness actually focuses on this waswas. And in fact, most of those that would come to the clinics for psychological and mental health issues are actually coming because of al-waswas. A lot of those that are classified as probably psychosis, probably getting OCD, and all the list goes on, and all of that is basically shaitan speaking into your mind, speaking into your heart, speaking into you. And it's making some people lose their ability to control things. It can actually end marriages. It can end your deen. It can end you. And those that would go through waswas, they'll tell you that it just becomes such a strong thing that is in their brain that sometimes it's like they just want to beat themselves up. It's just this constant sound, this constant word, this constant inner speech that's talking into your ear, into your head, making you doubtful of things. That's the key thing. Doubting your own self, doubting the things around you, doubting your own behavior, doubting the people around you, doubting your faith, doubting everything. Doubt is one key thing, but that's not the only thing. With that waswas, it could also tell you to do things. And this is so common. How to cure that waswas? Certainly, some may need medication, but majority actually need dhikr. وَإِذَا ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَلَص. This is the solution. If you are basically consistent in doing that dhikr, shaitan khanas. What is al-khanas? Khanas is to mean to get silenced. So shaitan, you want to silence that sound? Continue and do it in a repetition. Continue with your dhikr, and you're going to see that you will be capable of overcoming all this continuous waswas, this continuous sound that's in your ears, in your brain, trying to put in one, misconceptions, confusions, or perhaps even something where to do something in the future that's wrong, or making you doubt everything that's around you. One key thing the Prophet ﷺ was telling you, dhikrullah is key. Making that dhikr while you're sitting down, make that dua. Let others hear your dhikr. I know for many it sounds like an old lady that's basically doing her dhikr outside and out loud. But no, do your dhikr for you to hear it, for others to hear it, and to remember, and for you to let your tongue, ratib bidhikrillah, your tongue continuously, always. The people that speak too much, they would basically get more saliva than others. And they would also, of course, they would also require more drinking water. And when you're looking at that, that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, keep your tongue wet by mentioning the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's in order to tell us that wetness in your mouth is basically what's going to keep your heart itself always damp. Your heart is going to be damp. Why? Because your mouth itself is continuously keeping that moisture within your mouth, bidhikrillah. But it's not any type of a moisture. We're not talking about just talking about, I don't know, singing a song. We're talking about bidhikrillah, with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With the dhikr itself, and making dhikr is a way to cure even misconceptions. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afwa wal-afiyah fi dunya wal-akhirah. Many would come to me and say, I believe in Islam, but I know shaitan would come to me and I don't know what to say. I don't know how to fight all of this. I'm going to take you to another hadith, hopefully, while my laptop doesn't want to open it up, unfortunately, but that's all right. Let me tell you the hadith. I hope it allows me to, because I want you to see it. So what is the hadith? The Prophet ﷺ, I'm going to take you to this hadith. This Sahabi comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, "O Prophet of Allah," let's look at this hadith. Let's look at this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, a man comes to him, and this man, the Sahabi, is really concerned about something. What does he say? This man comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, "O Prophet of Allah." So, okay, here we go. This man comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "O Prophet of Allah, we would each يجد في نفسه يعرض بالشيء لأن يكون." I want you to look at this one. He was telling me we would actually have some things that are talking to us, some things that we would basically get all these different things that are coming to our brains, and it's not something that we basically believe in, but we would really love more if we were somehow, it's kind of like, he was giving it like it's a boiling thing. And we would, in another narration, he comes to him and he says, if the skies were ripped open, it would have been easier for us to actually see than us saying these words of what is getting inspired in our ears, that is. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah alladhi radda kaydahu ila al-waswasa." All the praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that returned the plots that shaitan is doing to nothing but al-waswasa. So what does that mean? How do we understand that? It's possible that shaitan can speak in your brain or speak to you of things that you don't approve of. And what happens, you would think of it as, well, what am I going to do with this? This is shaitan telling you and giving you the inspiration of things. But the Prophet ﷺ is telling you, well, if you didn't act upon it, the Prophet ﷺ said, رَدَّ كَيْدَهُ إِلَى الْوَسْوَسَةِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically returned and let his plots be in an area that is waswasa. What is waswasa? It's a paranoia. This paranoia is something that you recognize is not true. If you're paranoid about something, you ask the person, but do you know that that's not true? Let's say they're getting some thoughts, and these thoughts perhaps to kill. And they'll tell you, this is what I'm getting. The thoughts are telling me to kill. The thoughts are telling me to harm. The thoughts are telling me to harm myself, to cut my arms, to make myself bleed. And the thoughts are telling me to do bad things. I would say, do you recognize that it's wrong? They say, yes, I do recognize that it's wrong. But there's this paranoia. There's this thing that's pushing me to do this on the inside. It's telling me to do this. We would say, Alhamdulillah alladhi radda kaydahu ila al-waswasa. How did that happen? The Prophet ﷺ, when the other narration, he tells them, أَوَتَجِدُونَ ذَلِكَ, are you finding that? I said, yes, this is what we're getting. But the Prophet ﷺ was actually happy, and he regarded that that's a sign of their iman. How is it a sign of their iman? Because their intellect, their vision, their cognitive skills, let's call it, with that, they were awakened. They were capable of recognizing that that's not right, because their vision was purified by La ilaha illallah. And that's why they're capable of recognizing that this sound, this paranoia, this inner speech is not angelic, is not divine, is not holy, but it's wrong. And therefore, your awakened mind is fully aware that there is an inspiration from the other side, shaitani inspiration, that's trying to tell me do the wrong thing. But your awakened heart, your awakened mind, your awakened spirit is recognizing that no, this isn't right. I don't care what you tell me. This isn't right. This can be overcome with Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us that when you want to read the Quran or when you want to do that dhikr, what do? إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ, when just the glimpse of the shaitan, ta'if is like a ghost. But this isn't speaking about a ghost, a particular ghost, but this is actually talking about that even if it's a glimpse on the influence of shaitan for a believer, they would recognize by waking up and recognizing that no, the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will overcome this. What happens? تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. Let's look at this ayah right there. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually tell us? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. Look at this ayah right there. Those that who? اتَّقَوْا. Why اتَّقَوْا? Because if you really want to be amongst those that are capable of recognizing, let's call it satanic inspiration, an angelic or good inspiration, you would have to live a lifestyle of taqwa. What is taqwa? It's basically armoring yourself with doing the right things. Because if you're living fisq, you're going to continuously embrace these thoughts that are basically inspirations coming from shaitan. Why? Because you're going to be not armored. You're going to be an easy target, and shaitan will easily penetrate your mind, penetrate your heart, penetrate your spirituality, and you won't be capable of defending yourself. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا, those that are armored with taqwa, those that are armored with doing the right things. إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ, when they are pricked, the word is mess. What is il-mas? Il-mas can be a touch, but il-mas could also be that there's some form of an influence. طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ. What is a ta'if? It's a ghost. But this isn't talking about, it can mean ghost. It could also mean shade. So are we talking about ghost or shade? Well, we don't really know what shaitan looks like and how shaitan enters our body, or does he? How do they inspire us? How do they speak to us? How do they send messages? We know that animals, for example, they would sniff each other, and by the smell, they are capable of sending messages to one another. You would see birds flocking in a certain way. They're making a shape of a triangle, and they would shape in a triangle, and one would, while even though they're flying, and they would basically switch positions, one is taking the lead. In other words, we're seeing that in animals, there are different ways of communication. In human beings, different ways of communication between us too. You would call somebody and they were like, oh, I was just thinking about you. What happened? Is there a different inspiration? Al-arwahu junudun mujannada, the Prophet ﷺ says, that the souls and the spirits, they're basically like soldiers. They would connect with each other. How does that even happen? In other words, we would know that there are different ways that bodies communicate with one another. Well, even when it comes to shaitan, there are different ways that shaitan can communicate with us too. That's a طائف من الشيطان. That is the communication of shaitan, that they would come to you in a shade, in a way where you would not even see them, but they're actually there. How can I protect myself from this waswasa? He said, تذكروا فإذا هم مبصرون. They would just take the moment to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how does remembrance happen? That there's no way that you can go to remember unless you know. Because remembering something is basically dependent on you knowing something. You don't remember something that you had no data and record of. There's no way. You remember because you had a record of something, your brain basically, kept it in your data, in your brain right there, and this becomes a memory. And the word tadhakkaru is to actually say that there has to be a previous record of data, and therefore you would then be capable of remembering it, but that isn't going to happen unless you are continuously, look at that shadda right there, unless you're continuously reminding yourself and taking that records to do your dhikr, and فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. And that's when they would be capable of seeing it, capable of identifying it, capable of recognizing that ilm, that this is false, that this is a satanic inspiration. You want to keep in mind that ilm, there's ilm, that ilm, there's the ma'rifah, there's the knowledge to know something, but there's another stage, which is ilm al-yaqeen. There's certainty. And there's the other final stage, which is ayn al-yaqeen. It's when you know something as if you could see it. As if you could see it. This is important to keep in mind. فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. They're capable of identifying. It's the final stage of ilm, as if they could see the truth, because they're recognizing that that waswasa is not going to have the power to influence them if they did their dhikr and they're constantly living in dhikr. So how do we actually connect all of that? That's why the Prophet ﷺ, let's look at this hadith, that this hadith you could see is narrated by Sahih Muslim. What does the Prophet ﷺ say? The Prophet ﷺ says, تعوذوا بالله من الفتن ما ظهر منها وما بطن. فقالوا نعوذ بالله من الفتن ما ظهر منها وما بطن. The Prophet ﷺ was telling the Sahaba, he said, seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the different trials, the ones that are apparent and the ones that are concealed, the ones that everyone knows are fitna, but the ones that are hidden, the ones that are subliminal, may not be recognized by all. So the Sahaba, they repeated, and they said, نعوذ بالله من الفتن ما ظهر منها وما بطن. They repeated it again when he said that. Well, you want to keep in mind, how do we actually stay protected? To stay protected, you could see the Prophet ﷺ was teaching them, say it, repeat it, and they repeated it all together. That moment when they would repeat it, even though he already said it, did they know it? Well, they obviously heard what he said because they repeated what he said. But like we said, it's not enough to know and have that information. It's important to repeat. It's important to embrace. It's important to stay connected with the words, to let the words vibrate into your heart and vibrate into your mind. Well, this isn't something that you would only teach adults, but this is something that you would teach even the young ones. The Prophet ﷺ was teaching Abdullah ibn Abbas. What was he saying? Ya ghulam, inni u'allimuka kalimat. You got to memorize this hadith. What was he telling him? Oh, son, I'm going to teach you a couple words. احفظ الله يحفظك. I want you to preserve. You want to be preserved? You're afraid of perhaps the future, afraid of the past. You want to be able to stay secure and all of that. احفظ الله يحفظك. You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve. You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you protected. Well, يحفظك. You want that protection to be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what you have to do, you yourself gotta invest in keeping records and implementation of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically told you that guidance is. When you're talking about ihfadillah, this isn't talking about taking a moment to just, okay, all right, here, test me. Did I memorize it? This isn't necessarily what it's talking about. This is one portion of it. The other portion is you would actually apply it in life. احفظ الله تجده تجاهك. Preserve and embrace the patterns, the principles, the paradigms, the ethics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taught you. You will feel, you will see, you will basically find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right there for you. How is it? Where would I find Allah? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically in the path and on the path of guidance. Shaitan would be on the other path. You, by taking the path of guidance, then you will always find Allah for you there. Shaitan will come to inspire you. You're going to fail. It's not going to lead you there. Look at you. That's it. It's not going to get you there. You're just going to get into failure. It's not going to work out. Your life is going to be doomed. And Shaitan, يَعِدُكُمُ الْفَقْرِ. Shaitan is just promising you that you're just going to be in defeat, loss, and it's going to be the end of you. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising you Jannah, is promising you success, is promising you victory. And that's why he said, إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. You might feel compelled to ask others for help, to ask others to probably change your situation, and the list goes on and advice. He said, إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. Remember that hadith we did the other day when Jibreel alayhi salam comes to the Prophet and he tells him, Ya Jibreel, Ya Muhammad, ish ma shi'it fa innaka mayyit wa ahbib man shi'it fa innaka mufariqu. And then he tells him what? وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ شَرَفَ الْمُؤْمِنِ قِيَامُهُ بِاللَّيْلِ وَعِزُّهُ اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنِ النَّاسِ. This is the key. عِزُّهُ اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنِ النَّاسِ. You want true honor? You want to preserve your dignity? Well, you got to take that moment. You got to take that moment. الاستغناء عن الناس. You got to take that moment to free yourself from being dependent on others. Learn how to be independent. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was teaching him, إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. If you ask anyone, don't ask people, but ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِذَا اسْتَعَنْتَ فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ. You're seeking certain things that you're probably worried about. Seeking refuge, only seek it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're still afraid that maybe they're plotting. And he said, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ لَوْ اجْتَمَعَتْ عَلَىٰ أَن يَنْفَعُوكَ بِشَيْءٍ لَمْ يَنْفَعُوكَ إِلَّا بِشَيْءٍ قَدْ كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكَ. Just know, even if all the people would gather to somehow bring you a change, a good change in your life, they won't be capable of making that change in your life unless the Lord Almighty had already decreed that. And if they would all gather to harm you? No, that they would not be capable of harming you unless the Lord Almighty decreed that. رفعت الأقلام وجفت الصحف. The pens had been raised, a metaphor to mean that everything had already been decreed. No need to worry about the future. No need to worry about the past. Remember, جفت الصحف. That's it. That decree, that qadar had already been written for you. You just need to invest and live learning these kalimat. احفظ الله يحفظك. احفظ الله تجده تجاهك. إذا سألت فاسأل الله. وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله. واعلم أن الأمة لو اجتمعت على أن ينفعوك بشيء لم ينفعوك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله لك. ولو اجتمعوا على أن يضروك بشيء لم يضروك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله عليك. رفعت الأقلام وجفت الصحف. This is basically, inshallah, the end for today's class. Just try to memorize at least this hadith for this week. At least this hadith. Last week, we worked on the hadith Shaddad ibn Aus, and the week before it, the hadith Ya Muhammad Ish ma shi't. So try to work on one hadith at least every week, and hopefully, inshallah, that will be your dhikr, your reminder. Ya Rab, nas'al Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us husn al-khatimah. Nas'al Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ending that we're holding strong on La ilaha illallah, that we're holding strong on the inspiration to get to Jannah. Make us from those that are steadfast. Make us from those that would always unite on dhikrillah and always unite on the love and hubbillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and make us from those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would call on Judgment Day. أين المتحابون في? Where are those that have gathered in love of me, in love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah.
Yes, I have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I always have a question. So, I was just curious. You did talk about the shaitan doing the west in people's ear, and I just wondered, what about, do the malaika, do they also give you like inspiration or ideas in your mind or something?
So yes, the malaika, they do actually have a number of different things that they would do. I do actually have a whole lecture just to answer this question, the importance of believing in angels in Islam. And it's almost an hour and a half, almost 2 hours.
Okay, I'll have to check that out this weekend.
Yeah, we have to check that one out. But certainly the malaika, part of what they do is also lay out a type of an inspiration just like that. Remember when there's the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, any group of people, ما جلس قوم في بيت من بيوت الله, that they would basically sit in the masjid, in any masjid or any bayt min buyutillah, and they would remember and basically they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember dhikr, etc. إلا حفتهم الملائكة. So that حف الملائكة, that's basically the inspiration from the angel. That حف الملائكة وذكرهم الله في من عنده. Remember that hadith, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically mention their names with the malaika. In other words, boasting about them. These are such good people, etc. And I want you to take, there are a couple of things that are inspiring in this hadith. Number one, you could say that this hadith was actually talking about a group of people doing a type of meditation, a type of dhikr, reading Quran, dars ilm, etc., all of that. But what were they doing? Well, they were basically يقرؤون كتاب الله, يتدارسون كتاب الله, يتدارسون العلم, etc. They were studying basically all the different things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا حَفَّتْ, the Prophet ﷺ says, إِلَّا حَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Malaika would be there. This is part of the inspiration. حَفِّ الْمَلَائِكَةِ is part of the inspiration. They would make you feel that connection. They would make you connect with the words. Malaika would also inspire you to do what is good, but you basically have to make the choice, because even al-malaika would be hesitant to even write the wrong deeds, because they're trying to somehow give you the inspiration that maybe he'll basically go and repent, and perhaps he'll seek for forgiveness, and perhaps we won't have to record that anymore. Remember the hadith, the man that killed 100 people? And then the malaika, in the shape of human beings, they would come in and start debating whether he was supposed to be basically going to hellfire, or whether he was supposed to be going to Jannah. Remember that hadith and that piece of it? So you could see that the malaika's involvement in our life even give you protection. The malaika's involvement in our life is tremendous, that we may not realize it. All right. If a pregnant woman is getting a baby, and there's a certain time that there's a special malak. So, duty right there, he's got a mission. And what is he doing? Is basically taking records. I guess kind of like a nurse right there. It's got this board, and right now documenting certain notes right there. Why can't he just document it from there? No, he said, no, the angel comes down. So there are certain things that the malaika literally are around us, documenting things, giving us some inspiration, telling us of what we need to do, and sometimes, I guess, reminding us, and sometimes sitting around us in dhikr, sometimes probably protecting us without us realizing, ever getting to this your car slips and it's like, oh wow, that was close, right? And what happened? What was the angel that protected you by the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How many times did we get into something that's like, it was this close, I would have probably gotten killed, car accident, gotten something into something, but that was the malaika. No, it was just a glimpse. It was just, if it was not basically probably steering you off the track, that's it. You would have been killed. But it was boom, just that slight thing. What happened got you off track? What happened that just got you within an instant? It was just a second and a millisecond, and you were protected. That's basically the malaika. It's basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordering the malaika to do that. بحفظ الله ورعايته. That's it. Did I answer the question, Noura?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair.
Allah yahfadak ya Rabbi. And what we'll do, I wanted to do tafsir, but I think it would be hectic on you and hectic on me as well, because you could see I'm losing my voice because of my cold flu. I don't know what you classify it as. So what we'll do, inshallah, I really, really wanted to do tafsir today, but my throat is constantly giving me these scratches, like, okay, I need to rest.
Can I ask some questions, please?
Go ahead, dear.
You had mentioned ghafla, and you said that entertainment, which the Quran calls taruf, did I get that right? Is one means of
Ghafla, and
ghafla?
what is the word that you said?
Taruf? Did you say taruf? I didn't get that.
Taraf.
Taraf. Okay. Is there an
Taraf.
ayah that I can look at for that?
Oh, there are so many ayat. If I were, you know what? Let me take you to a way that you could actually find. Let me show you how you could find it in the Quran. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to show you how to search. It's going to be really easy. So, at-taraf fil Quran. Okay, I'm gonna write that down. Okay, fil Quran. And there's this beautiful website. And hold on, let me do it again. There's a really beautiful website would basically give you all the different things that relate to that. It's called Quran. Here we go. So Ilmani, no, not that one. Ittaraf fil Quran. Here we go. Give you all the different ayat that relate to it. And it would just bring you all those ayat that relate to taraf, for example. And believe it or not, but your Quran as well basically has it. And if let's say it's like, okay, well, this is Arabic, I can't understand it. Oh, simple, dear. All you need to do, you're going to go right there and you're going to ask it to translate it into English. Translate it into English, dear. Okay, right now it doesn't feel like it because my internet is slow, but you can translate it into English. My internet is slow. Oh dear. لا يا ماما.
Is this
انت
site called
سويتي شيء
Move?
وطلعني من هوني. أخي. All right, so let's do it again. Sorry, my son was playing with the phone. It took away my internet. Oh, see? Try again. Okay. Well, so it can actually give you, even in your Qur'ans, what was it?
I think we lost her.
Oh, subhanallah.
Yeah, I think so. Did you catch the name of that site? Modoi.com?
No, I didn't, subhanallah. But maybe we can ask her if she could share it in the WhatsApp group, inshallah.
Right. Inshallah. Okay. I had a few other questions. I guess we can leave it for next time, inshallah.
I wonder if she'll be back. Should we stay like a minute or two?
Okay. Yeah, good idea. I'm sure knowing her, she'll probably want to come back.
Alhamdulillah.
Mashallah, mashallah.
Mashallah. Alhamdulillah. Oh, she does have a lecture on luxury on her YouTube channel also.
Okay. Do you know what she said for Ghafla, entertainment was one means? Did she give any other means? I mean, what other reasons cause Ghafla? Result of losing touch with the connection with Allah through His words was another reason. Did you all catch that?
Sister Umayya?
I don't know where she is. Okay, I'll ask her. I'll ask her next time, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
I mean, she did mention the different forces that were calling you to the dunya, and other than the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's what I needed to know. I just wanted to make like a list, for myself.
Okay, I'll post the recording of the lecture, inshallah, in the WhatsApp group too, inshallah.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if she's going to come back or not, subhanallah.
Okay, all right. Jazakallah khairan.
Oh, wa yakum. Wa yakum. Sisters, salam alaikum. Would anyone like to join the class every week, inshallah?
I thought the class was every week. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, it is, but we do have a separate WhatsApp group for the course.
Okay. This is Marissa. I think I'm in the
Oh,
group.
assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. Yeah, I think I'm in the group already. That's where I got the link. You posted that the class was about to start, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm in it.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, let's see. Dr. Aisha, she's saying something really fast.
Okay.
Okay, she said her connection dropped, but she'll send a video that answers the question, inshallah. So I'll ask her also for the link, inshallah.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. Inshallah, see you guys next week.
No,
Inshallah.
Sunday. Sunday, no?
Oh, is this? Oh, yeah, Sunday.
Sunday, inshallah. Yeah.
Sorry. Alhamdulillah. Okay,
Sister Dora,
yes.
do we have tafsir today?
Do we have what?
No,
Tafsir?
Sheikha said no. Sheikha said no.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit. Because she isn't feeling very good, and
It looks her sound like this.
yeah.
Yeah, tired.
I have a mail to make things easy. I mean, you don't. I have a question for her, and how can I ask her, because I don't want to take class time.
Oh,
But the
sure.
thing,
Yes,
but
we.
okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that we have a fiqh group where we actually can ask her questions.
Okay, is
Are-
that also WhatsApp, or how does that work?
Yes. If you text me, do you have my number?
Yeah. We're connected on WhatsApp now.
Okay,
I'll
alhamdulillah. Yeah, text me
Mhm.
and I'll give you the link for the whole Gems of Light group, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Oh, wa yakum, inshallah.
Mm.
Alhamdulillah. Oh, the Asma al-Husna. So, right now, Dr. Aisha, she's taking over for Dr. Haifa Yunus with Jannah Institute. So she's doing that full time. So right now her plate is really full with classes. But she plans on resuming the Asma al-Husna in the future, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan. Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu